Boivert, and welcome to this week's program of Speak Your Mind. I'm Wame Valentine, live on this radio station, 100.2 FM, and Bula also to the folks who are listening in or watching from their homes on FBC TV on Tuesday nights and Wednesday morning. I also like to welcome the international audience listening in online around the world, goldfm.fbc.com.fj. We'll be speaking to a few guests today. Later on in the program, we'll be speaking to the FBC Rugby commentator, Graham Eden. We'll also be speaking to the FRU coaching director, Mr. Frank Boivert. And also, we welcome, as always, the views of the listeners and also the viewers of this broadcast by calling into the studio. You can call into the studio, direct line 3220-906 and 3220-907. For those of you who are listening in outside of this country, online, you can send in your questions as well via email, goldfm@fbc.com.fj. Now, in 2011, the Institute of Research and Social Analysis of the Pacific Theological College began a research project, which is now a book. I have that book with me now. It's called Voices of the People, Perceptions and Preconditions for Democratic Development in Fiji. I just put the book up just for a good shot on television for the folks of those watching this on TV. Now, just yesterday, Wednesday, the 20th of February, Ratu Joni Madraiwiwi was the chief guest during the launch, and today we'll be speaking to one of the folks who are part of the institute that brought about this book. I'm joined by the former media personality and now church minister, Reverend James Bhagwan. Reverend Bhagwan is a member of the Institute of Research and Social Analysis, or the IRSA. Reverend Bhagwan, good afternoon to you, sir, and welcome.
Boivert, it's a pleasure to be here, and Boivert to our listeners and viewers on FBC TV.
Now, as mentioned, if you have a question for Reverend Bhagwan, you can call in. This is quite a thought-provoking book, I should mention. But before we go into this book, Reverend, just tell me a bit about the Institute, the Institute of Research, Social Analysis of the Pacific Theological College. For those who are not familiar with this institute, what is the institute all about?
Thank you, Wame. Well, the Institute for Research and Social Analysis comes under the Pacific Theological College. The Pacific Theological College, as some of you may be aware, is the region's main ecumenical theological training center. It serves about 40 theological or trains students from about 40 churches in the Pacific region. And so this institute was established some years ago to assist the churches and communities that the churches serve in areas of research and social analysis. So the Institute undertakes research projects, and it also does courses and training programs in the areas of leadership and management, social analysis, and issues that are affecting Pacific Island countries and, of course, the church members. So the aim of the Institute was, of course, not only to serve as an academic institute for the Theological College, but also to assist the churches in issues that are affecting them in the 21st century.
Voices of the People, Perceptions and Preconditions for Democratic Development in Fiji. What does this book deal with?
Well, this book basically deals with some of the major issues that are affecting Fiji at this present time. As you know, for the last 3 decades, we have had political crises. And as the years have gone on by, the reality has come that there is something wrong with our democratic system, in that sense that it's not working well, what we understand democracy to be. Some people believe that is because that the type of democracy that we've been using, that was adopted from the Westminster system in Great Britain back in the 1970 when we became independent, that there was no real consultation with the people. So it was something that was imported, we could say. So the idea behind this project, which has been in development since about 2008, is to look at what are people's understanding of what democracy is, and then what are some of the issues that they are facing. And this particular research project looked at 5 areas. It was to see what the understanding of the people was about things like democracy, rule of law, leadership, decision-making, and citizenship. And not only get their understanding, but what their views and what their contributions would be to how do we make Fiji, what kind of model of governance can we have for Fiji that is really workable in Fiji. Many times during political crises, we have people saying democracy is a foreign flower, and then now we have people arguing for different cases. But how can we find the model that works best for the people of Fiji?
Are you sensing then, or are you saying, Reverend Bhagwan, because the truth is this country is a rather unique country. What might work in another country might not necessarily work here. Does this book deal with the fact or answer the question whether or not democracy works in this country?
Well, I think it asks the question, what kind of democracy would work in Fiji? That is the sort of the underlying question that is there. And, we have over the years issues of differences, racial issues, ethnic tension, religious issues. We have the Itoke concerns. And we have a system in Fiji which we kind of have a dual system. We have a modern democratic system in the running of the government, but we still have the traditional Itoke system, the way that the Tekina councils, the Vanua is run. And sometimes there are overlaps and clashes that take place. And you find some people caught in the middle because they don't know which one to follow. So it's trying to find a way where each person has a value, whether it's one person, one vote, or in terms of trying to say, what do we mean by self-determination? How does Fiji determine for itself a system of governance that matches the culture, the people that we have, while at the same time fitting in with the very important international conventions and international rule of law?
I will have to mention this, though, and Reverend James, you probably agree with this, that this book comes at a time where it's rather sensitive, at a rather sensitive stage in this country, considering that we've got a new constitution that we're about to adopt, and also considering that we've got elections coming up in 2014. What you've mentioned about the rule of law, what has the folks that you mentioned managed to interview? Or before I ask that question, though, how do you go about in getting these individuals to write down their voices?
Well, the way in which the research was conducted, and it was conducted from August in 2011 until April 2012. So over those months, we had 41 focus group discussions, which had about 330 participants. So these are communities of mixed communities. They are Indo-Fijian communities, Itoke communities, Ratuman, other races, and male and female and mixed, and all over the country. And these focus groups shared their understanding of the issues that we asked about, what they understood by democracy, what were the issues that they didn't understand, those sorts of things. Same thing about rule of law, what they understood rule of law to mean. What they think leadership means, what type of leadership they experience in their communities, in their homes, and what type of leadership they should have. Same with decision-making and citizenship. And we also conducted 83 in-depth interviews with a cross-section of society, government officials, individuals, eminent people, ordinary people, business people, to get their views as well. Right. So it's quite a comprehensive exercise. The difference, perhaps we could say, with the Constitution Commission, the Constitution went out and asked for submissions, and they went and they received the submissions of the people. The exercise in this case was something a little bit different, where we went and we asked them what they thought about certain issues. So it wasn't that they had to prepare submissions, but they were sharing, and then that was analyzed. And that's the focus of this, is what is their voice? What do they see?
And that's the cool thing about this book. I mean, we don't want folks to be confused. This is not what the Institute think about the issues in this country. This is really what the people of the country, the Fijian people, think about important issues that we're dealing with. We'll take a break. We'll come back with more right here on Speak Your Mind. And we're back. Reverend James Bhagwan joins me today from the Institute of Research and Social Analysis regarding the new book, Voices of the People, Perceptions as well as Preconditions for Democratic Development in Fiji. Phone lines are still open, 3220-906 and 907. Before we went to a break, we were speaking about democracy. And before we did speak about democracy, you mentioned earlier on during your introduction, Reverend James, about for the past, almost 3 decades now, there's been the political climate in this country has been somewhat unstable. Hang on a second. I think we've got a call on line 7. We'll put him on hold. We'll go to him in a minute. This book obviously talks about democratic rule, and also it gives the views of the Fijian people regarding democratic rule. Why do you think, why does the book say as to the reason why this country hasn't been able to be politically stable for the last 30 years? You've mentioned, and we've talked about how this is rather a unique country. What might work in other parts might not work here. Why do you think it hasn't worked here?
Well, one of the reasons, as we've come up from the research, as I mentioned earlier, the way in which we adopted democracy and the type of democracy that we adopted, and that was based on the British Westminster system. The research in the focus groups going out into the communities has found that people's understanding of democracy is also not very strong. So those who are well educated may have some deeper understanding of democracy, and some people only have the understanding that in what they've experienced. So democracy is not only about elections. You know, people often think democracy and elections, that's an important part, but it's also about the accountability of the representatives to the people and that whole process. So often when we talk about what's your understanding of democracy, the response would be it's elections, having an elected government. But the need for a deeper understanding of democracy is what came through very loudly. A need to understand that democracy can go through not just in Parliament, but also in the village councils, in the town councils, and that there should be some form of accountability to the people.
We'll cross over to the phone lines, Reverend James. We've got a call on line 7. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Reginald Rayman, and I was going to say some things that your guest has already spoken about. The issue of democracy. If you look at any dictionary, and dictionaries are very precise and very short, it only says that the voice of the people, especially the underprivileged. Now, if you looked at electoral politics, you'll find that more and more throughout the world that parliaments, politicians, and political parties, when they get into parliament, they sort of miss out on that very definition of democracy, and exactly what your speaker was saying. If you don't mind, I'll talk a bit about my submission to the Constitution Commission, where I said no elections. Now, no elections is the way the world is going. It's surprising as it is. The Prime Minister of Iceland, he sort of said, let's get back to pure democracy, which means every man has a say in the government, not through Parliament, not through his elected constituency and all the rest of it. So, really, if we can get back to that, I mean, my submission is quite lengthy to the Commission, but all I'm saying there was that we go back to a system where people put in their submission. The man on the street puts in submission, say to our advisory council, which can be updated to something else, and what we do, it comes up to a certain point where everything is collated. If you talk about health, welfare, education, agriculture, everything is collated in those areas. They come up to, say, the Commissioner's office, where it further gets redefined, policy making starts there, and then you come to a point where Parliament is no longer, because then you have two tiers, call it council, call it assembly, whatever you want to call it. People sit in that, and it's people stand in a queue to want to serve the government. Now, that's where we find that we will differentiate from politicians and people who really want to serve the people, as in the definition. So what I'm saying here, really, you eventually start off right from the man on the street who has a say, and that man can always say, what happened to my say? He goes back to advisory council, and the advisory council says, oh, yes, we have put it up. Here's your copy of the thing, rest of it. But anyway, the program is short, and all I'm saying is that no elections was my theme, and I think a lot of people in the world are writing on that issue because electoral politics is not working. Thank you.
That's rather an interesting view, interesting system. Reverend James, what do you think about it?
Well, I'm a one-man, one-vote kind of person myself. But there's some interesting things mentioned by our caller, and that is something that I mentioned earlier. If we look at the understanding of democracy, taking it not just for electing the House of Representatives, but also looking at the village council, town council, and so perhaps if we're looking at political parties, their role is in the House of Parliament. But the role of people having their voices heard at village level, at town council level, and so instead of the political parties campaigning for who's your town council or city councillor, that could be done in the form, and that's one of the recommendations, to look at how it could be within neighborhoods, within suburbs, and you elect your representative from that suburb. To go a little bit further, just to give an example, currently in most town and city councils, it's usually, when we have elected councillors, it's usually only ratepayers who can vote. That means only those who own land and property and pay rates in the city or the town can vote. So it would be expanding that to ensure that everybody gets some sort of say in how the municipal council is run, ensuring that there is good accountability in the Tekina and other councils, and to link all the systems. So it's not just one separate system here, one separate system of governance here, and then we have this overarching national government which is doing on different things.
But does he have a point when he says that electoral form of democracy isn't working any longer? And he made reference to what the Iceland Prime Minister said, let's go back to pure democracy.
Well, there is a point, everybody has a point. And I think one of the reasons that we call this book Voices of the People is that everybody has a voice and everybody has a point. And one of the key findings that we had in this book was that there are diverse points of view. So not everybody in this particular book, or as a result of the research, not everybody in the research agreed with each other. So you'll find people saying, let's go to elections as soon as possible. There are those who are saying, let's wait. So he is one of those people who say, let's wait. And the idea is, let's hear everybody's voice and try and see what everybody is thinking. And only when we know what everybody is thinking, or what as many people we can hear are thinking, can we really have an understanding of the way forward.
Some have wondered, and I've read a few reports that agreed with this way of thinking. Some have wondered that because we've been under British rule before 1970, and back then there was quite a lot of segregation, that played a part in the instability of politics in this country. Would you say the same thing?
Well, this is something that was covered in the area of citizenship in our research. And one of the key findings of the research on citizenship was that the majority of people wanted some form of national identity. A lot of people were happy with the name Fijian, for all of us who are Fiji citizens. Some people did not, but across the board there was wide support for some form of national identity, a common identity. And I think that is the starting point. When we start to have the commonalities and celebrate the commonalities rather than focusing on the differences.
So, Reverend, we'll take a quick break and we'll come back with more on Speak Your Mind. And we're back with Reverend James Bhagwan. Reverend, this book doesn't shy away from sensitive topics. For instance, the role of the Fijian military. And I know this book says a bit about that issue. What does the book say?
Well, thank you, Wame. The issue was covered because that is the situation that we're living in. And so it was addressed both in the focus groups and in the interviews. And from what we can gather, the role and function of the military was a matter of debate amongst the interviewees, given its involvement in one way or another in all the coups that have taken place in Fiji. Few want the military to be abolished, but most feel that this is not feasible.
Abolished altogether.
That was the view of some of the people that were interviewed. As to the role of the military in protecting the state and the constitution, there was broad agreement over the people that were interviewed as part of the research that in-depth debate on the issue, dealing with such questions as on what grounds, if ever, the military could consider removing elected government. So there's a need for further discussion. And the vast majority of interviewees want the military to return power to the people as soon as possible. An exit strategy is seen as being critical to this process, with most of the people who were interviewed mooting some form of amnesty.
Mm. Reverend, I've noticed after reading some parts of this book that most of the Fijians that you interviewed have some rather unflattering views of politicians. Why do you think that's so?
Well, I suppose it's their experience. And this is the thing, when we go out and the interviews are done, they are sharing their own experiences. So it's not just what they think, but what they have experienced. So some have experienced that the only time they see a politician is during campaigning times, and then they never come back again. And, so they say, we don't like party politics. We want representation that's true representation. So this is the thing. The point of this exercise was to find out, what do people really think? And then based on that, and based on an academic scholarly review of literature and things like that, come up with some recommendations. And then this book is for the people of Fiji. It's an academic book, of course, but there's also areas that people can read and make informed decisions as a result of reading that.
Now, one cannot really simply overlook a lot of people seem to say, outstanding work that the Bainimarama administration has done to the Fijian people in the time it has been in power. And this book documents the gratitude of the Fijian people regarding the work that the Bainimarama administration has done. I'm looking at the page 39. And as you've mentioned, Reverend, people, this is a book about the people and what they think. What do the people think about the current administration?
Well, as you can see in the report, and those who get a copy of it, there is both support and criticism of the government. Those who have experienced development in their provinces or in their areas for the first time or after a long time are very grateful, and that's important that development has occurred. And so people see it as efficient and beneficial. Some people say some of the policies that have been introduced have been very good for the country. And so, as he says, there's a lot of expression of gratitude for the relationship that people are experiencing between the current government and the people. On the other hand, various focus groups also expressed reservations and opposition to the current government based on nobody can overthrow or overpower in the name of democracy. So you've got people on both sides. Some say, let's keep going. As perhaps our earlier caller said, let's just keep going and don't have elections. And some say we need to return to the rule of democracy and voting and that sort of thing. And the question perhaps that we can take away to think about personally and reflect is, why are those people saying what they are saying? Why are they saying we should just carry on with the way it is? Because they have experienced for the first time or after a long time development that they feel should have been taken place by past governments.
But what needs to be done, Reverend? And I'm sure the book, obviously the book gets the views of the people and the Fijians at large, but what really needs to be done to ensure that there's a stable political climate in the future?
Okay, well, the first recommendation by the book is that the one person, one vote electoral system should be adopted, as it's seen as the most suitable electoral system for Fiji because individual votes are recognized. One of the key areas that they've been talking about is civic education, and this is very important.
That's important.
Both education at adult level, civic education, but also taking it down to schools, so people have a broader understanding of not only the rule of law and the courts and the understanding of democracy and things like that, but also about values. If we can inculcate the values that we need to have in this country. It's done in some ways by religious organizations, but things like having more interfaith dialogue, more intercultural exchange. So, example, when you have language in school, when you have vernacular, not only the Itoke are learning that language, Indo-Fijians can also learn Itoke and learn about each other's culture rather than just learning about your own culture. Those things are very important. That's part of the civic education, and I think part of the process also of citizenship.
In relation to in previous administrations, what has been the views of the people that the voices of the people interviewed?
Well, everyone had their own views about different governments in the past. People talked about all aspects of it. As you said, we got a lot of comments about politicians. And because that has been their experience of government in the past, that the only time they've really experienced any contact with the government is when people are campaigning.
Right.
And then maybe if there's some development that's taking place, big maybe if that's taking place. So those are some of the issues. But the main point that we come down to at the end of the day is, how do we find something that is sustainable for Fiji so that it doesn't get chucked away 10, 20 years down the line?
It's a very thought-provoking read, and it's fairly comprehensive. Voices of the People, Perceptions and Preconditions for Democratic Development in Fiji. For those who are listening and those who are watching at their homes, where could they purchase the book?
The book will be on sale at the Pacific Theological College bookshop. I think it's going to be a nominal fee of $20 or something like that. We did give out free copies to everyone who turned up to the launch last night. And I think it also will be available at the USB bookshop in the future. Or you can contact the Institute, and maybe if you carry, they might give you one for free. You never know.
You never know. Why is it important that every Fijian get a hand on this book?
Well, two things. One, we are coming towards elections next year. And perhaps there are people who will be involved in the Constituents Assembly. So this is a way to know one thing, what people perceive about democracy, so what they understand, whether it's a correct view or not. This is what the people know or believe and think about these issues: democracy, rule of law, citizenship, leadership, decision-making. So that's another important thing. And secondly, for the ordinary citizen, it's a way to understand where we are and how we are as a country, and how we can possibly move forward. And for an academic, if you want to do research on the country, this is probably one of the latest pieces of research out.
Well, there you have it, folks. Voices of the People, Perceptions and Preconditions for Democratic Development in Fiji. As the good Reverend had mentioned, you could purchase it at the Pacific Theological College for a small fee of $20. I do think we've got a caller on the line. Before we say goodbye to Reverend James, we'll just cross over one more time. Line 7, Gold FM, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I was just waiting for other callers to call in, but I'm calling again. Sorry.
That's fine. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, talking about sustainability, stability, you'll find that electoral politics will always have adversarial. It's adversarial in the nature, confrontational in nature. Any country you pick, right? Look at Obama and Romney. What happened there? Dirty linens in the street, so to speak. When PER was uplifted in Fiji, dirty linens on the street, all our various politics. They were frozen in 2006 and still have the same mentality. Now, my system of no election exactly brings back pure democracy, because the man on the street is able to have his submission right up to the highest point, what might be now Parliament. He has a say right in Parliament, not through constituencies, not through politicians, not through political parties, but himself is head. Pure democracy. Number two, then why don't we have the guts to change, We might be the first country. I mentioned Iceland long ago. California is doing the same thing, a state in the United States. Right? A lot of people out there are trying to say that electoral politics just doesn't work. It seems to be, as you used to say, they fill their own pockets, very rudely. I'm saying that, but there are some clean politics. But they get all sort of messed up in parliamentary procedures, and people eventually are not served. Thank you. And the other thing I was going to say, that Bainimarama is not going to live forever. His idea is good. But I didn't say that he should continue. What I said, that when people in the villages are saying you're doing a very good work, elected government, we're not doing their job. People are saying it over and over.
Right.
20 years we're not visited. What does that tell us? That tells us pure democracy is working now. Thank you.
Thank you for that note and for that thought. And I guess on that thought, we'd wrap up this segment. Reverend James Bhagwan. As mentioned, you could pick up the Voices of the People at the Pacific Theological College. Reverend James, many thanks.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to come on the show. My mother enjoys the show a lot, and she said she saw you and she likes the way you have your hairstyle. So well done.
You give my best to your mom. Reverend, we'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll speak to Graham Eden as well as the FRU coaching director, Mr. Frank Boivert. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind. Joining me today is the FBC Rugby commentator, Mr. Graham Eden, as well as the FRU coaching director, Mr. Frank Boivert. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly.
Very good.
Thank you. We're not going to live. They join me now. We've got the phone lines open, 3220-906, 3220-907. As you can suspect, we won't be speaking about politics, but we will be speaking about a completely different topic altogether. And that's sports, or at least more specifically, rugby sevens. And Graham, for the most part, I think most Fijians now really should understand to have a change of mentality, really, that the Fijian rugby team or rugby sevens that they've always rooted for in the past isn't exactly what they expected it today?
I think that's a real understatement, in actual fact, that when we go back for 34 years, 35 years, during the period since 1976, that's more than 35 years, when Hong Kong was first on, that things have changed just so dramatically that when Fiji took to the game like a bird takes to water, it was expected that we were going to win all the time. We won many times, pardon me, in those days, but the things have changed so much, particularly in the last 5 years, that we can't expect the same thing. The IRB in its own right has changed the total interpretation, the total presentation, and the total intention of the Rugby Sevens, to the extent that the Rugby Sevens is played now by women. It's played also as wheelchair rugby. It's played as men's rugby right through the ages. And I just see this morning in another one that we're going to play underage sevens rugby. Now that then is aiming, obviously, to create a pathway to the elite of sevens rugby, which we've been involved in incessantly, like New Zealand, and there are not many, who've played every year in either Hong Kong or the subsequent development from it, which in fact has been the IRB 7 circuit, which is now just over 10 years old. The game, the style, the attitude, the approach, it's all changing. It's continuing to change, and I don't mind saying we've been left behind.
Let me just ask though, Graham, obviously with time there are changes, but how has the changes from IRB side has to do with Fiji's poor performances for the last tournaments?
Well, I think it's a matter of tactics and technique. That in early days, essentially the big boys of the Sevens all played a similar style. With the introduction more recently, like in the last even 2 years, where the IRB have changed in such a way that they now have 12 core teams in a 16-team tournament, they have increased the ability of the younger countries playing now sevens to better their performances, their own skills, and apply it into a game that they once knew very little about. We, on the other hand, have not changed. We really are still playing sevens rugby as it was played 10 years ago, not even just 5 years ago. And we're still playing so much individual stuff, and the most recent performances have indicated our individualism is related to the team performing how the individuals in the team want to play.
I've been watching the games, the recent games, and also listening to your commentary, Graham, and I've noticed that you've mentioned something continuously, and that's the errors that were committed in earlier tournaments are still committed, and they weren't fixed. Is that also an issue?
Well, it very is. It is very much an issue. So much so, I'm glad you brought it up, because right in front of me here now, I have the statistics of play of the various games from Wellington through to Las Vegas, both of which, of course, I was lucky enough to be at, both of which I was privileged to be able to speak to the country about. And it is noticeable that there is a set of skills that we have not managed to master. There are things in the game that are the same as they were before even Wellington that have not changed to Las Vegas. They were still the same errors in Las Vegas as I expect we'll see in Hong Kong. Now, to my mind, that shows that, one, the coaches, the management, the players themselves have never seen these statistics that are here telling us that there are so many missed passes, there are so many dropped balls, there are so many restarts that are not regained, there's so much indiscipline in the side, giving away penalties. There are many, many repeats of what are basic skills of the game without changing the technique of the game. They are basic aspects of the game. When we got to Las Vegas, they do exactly the same thing. And here I have a lot. The England, straight in front of me, the England versus Fiji game, Fiji won 26 points to 17. We won not because we mastered those in particular, but because we were able to just tone the English team down. And perhaps it's a bad one for me to choose, but lineouts won. Fiji didn't win a lineout. Set pieces won. We had England winning 8 times. We only won 3. Reset ball 1. Fiji won 3, but not England only got 1. Restarts retained, none. England get them. Now that is, if we were to look through, that is a repeat all the way through, and I think it shows that we are not taking any notice of statistics that can enable us to better it. Now you say, why should we? Well, I think it came to pass to me in Las Vegas in particular, that if we remember, South Africa were playing blasting rugby. They played probably better, Frank, than they had played since a couple of seasons before. Now, before the semi-finals came along, after their quarter-final match, I've forgotten who they played, we were up in the media box, and who should come running up into the media box, speak to the referees who were operating from the area of the media box, and he wanted just that set of statistics. And I believe that when he did it the second time after they'd won the semi-final, he came and did exactly the same thing, and he used what he learned from here, what they weren't doing right, and he applied it to the game. We never saw our manager, never saw our coach, never saw a team member in that area consulting the statistics to show what went wrong.
Graham, let me just jump in. We'll take a quick break and we'll return with more and maybe speak to Frank when we come back for the final segment of Speak Your Mind. Welcome back to the final segment of Speak Your Minds. Before we wrap things up in the studio, I've got Graham Eden, of whom you heard from earlier on. We'll now speak to the FRU Coaching Director, Frank Boivert, before we wrap up the Speak Your Mind for this week here in the studio. We'll leave the phone lines open, 3220-906 and 3220-907. I suppose we could facilitate a question or two before we wrap things up. But Frank, as Graham had mentioned earlier on, the consistency in these errors, one can only suspect that, as he has mentioned, the management and the coach were not paying attention to the statistics. I mean, what's going wrong in the Fijian camp?
Right. Well, I can only corroborate what Graham has explained, and then, I think also the level of play of the RB circuit has drastically improved. Okay, the best example I can give is that the 2 finalists of the Wellington Sevens were in the bowl of the Las Vegas Sevens, So this is to show you that at this level of play, we cannot afford any longer not to pay attention to any details. Okay, and this is one of our key to success in coaching. We say that they are, one of the fundamentals is paying attention to details, and that's what exactly Graham has maybe outlined. That is, maybe we don't pay enough attention to details, and this is what we have to. The work that we have to do in training and educating our coaches.
The devil is in the details. I mean, with the last tournaments, in the previous tournaments, with the errors that has been committed, how could the Fijian listeners, the Fijian public, the viewers expect a better performance? Or why should they expect a better performance come Hong Kong?
Right. Well, it's just that we need to address those issues that Graham has just outlined. But by doing that, the preparation of the team is extremely important. It is very difficult to maybe change things during the course of a tournament if the players have not been prepared to this type of approach to the game. And I think this is therefore it takes us back again to the environment in which the players need to be coached, the environment in which the players need to be prepared for those big tournaments where there is no more room for error. And I think this is where I think everyone has to realize that now the stakes are extremely high. The exercise of coaching at the international level is much more demanding, and right now we need to address those demands.
Now, let me bring it back to you, Graham. Judging by your commentaries in the past, I suppose it's fair to say that you're not exactly a fan of the current coach of the Fiji Sevens side, to put it very mildly. I mean, what does, in your view and opinion, makes a coach?
Well, I think that's perhaps a little understatement in some ways, insofar as when the coach was appointed, there were certain criteria that were required. I don't believe that the coach fulfilled that criteria, and yet he was appointed. I am a fan, may I say, please excuse me, of Graham Henry, the All Black coach, and I have spent quite some time reading and rereading Graham Henry's book. And I felt that his comment in respect to a coach might be helpful in our quest. And he says that he applied to coach the All Blacks because of his huge passion for coaching. And he said, it's my profession, every session to be better, more stimulating, more thought-provoking. It increases the knowledge and skills, or it aims to. It wants the guys to be totally prepared and totally motivated, and the harder and smarter you work, the better you play. I can't think of a better way of describing the requirements of a coach. So with that in mind, and as I say, I'm a follower of Graham Henry. He did the same sports physical education course at Otago University that I did, and I understand he himself followed a certain procedure to get him into a position of being the All Black coach. That is his principle and policy. But then when we come down a little further, and if I may take time that Frank might like to use, I would say that he had principles involved in the actual coaching. And he says, winning rugby is about the control of the advantage line. If you control that, you win the game. We all know what the advantage lane is. We've all got to get in front of it ourselves. If we've got possession, if they've got possession, we've got to stop them from getting in front of the advantage lane. This is not fulfilled, as we see. We don't support the kick-off. We don't get up there in the faces. I often say that in terms of the actual progress of the game. He goes on to say, winning rugby is about receiving top-quality ball from set pieces, getting it over the advantage lane, and either scoring tries from those strikes or recycling as quickly as possible and scoring tries from second phase attacks, which might number 9 or 10. And then, conversely, your team has to stop the opposition from doing those things by giving them poor quality set piece and controlling the advantage lane. Defence is the backbone that wins game. Winning rugby is about having an attack plan from turnover ball, the ball kicked to you, or what opposition give you by their very mistakes, or through turnovers at the tackle. It's one of the biggest faults that we've got, the turnovers at the tackle. We can't win the ball from the ground. He goes on and says quite a number of things. Make your tackles, treasure possession, and be supremely fit.
We've got a few seconds left with us, Graham. Excuse me. Before we wrap up Speak Your Mind for this week, and before we do so, sir, you've mentioned some of the points that we need to improve on. There's more to winning a rugby match than just the techniques and the players, the management, the coaching as well, as you've referred to earlier on. What are some things that we need to improve on as we're working towards Hong Kong Sevens now?
Well, I think now I feel that there is a desperate need for an additional member of the management team, such a person as the, and what's the term, the official term, Frank?
Technical advisor.
Technical, that's what we want. We want a technically motivated person who has a thorough knowledge of the game to be able to help the coach apply the techniques that he feels, that they together feel are appropriate to the stages of the game that's being played. We had that in the Hong Kong Sevens, way back when Wayne Pevek and Paul Feeney were there. They helped Wesley Sarevi, who was coach at the time. It was a successful effort, and we won the World Cup. I believe we need somebody technically inclined to go with a manager. We need a manager who's a personality, a fellow who will mix with not only our own players. Believe there's a few problems there if I sense what I see correctly. I think that there isn't enough togetherness of the side. There's not enough putting together of the new and younger players with the older, more experienced players. They don't mould together well. That is a management skill. So we need, I think, not just our technical fellow, but we need almost a thinker there to be able to put all these things together. There are so many things that are not really quite right. We need to be able to put many items together.
We've got about 15 seconds. Do you think that's enough to see a good outcome, good result in Hong Kong?
I don't think it's enough. I think we need a lot more, but it's on the road to possible success, on the road to Hong Kong, which we want to win.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Graham Eden, and also thank Frank Boivert from the FRU, coaching director from the FRU, wrapping up Speak Your Mind for this week. Do join us again next week. Till then, first of all, gentlemen, we're not only for coming by. Till next week, bye for now.